Welcome to the first Canvatorium Visio lab tour, or maybe recap. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call these, but I'm going to occasionally record longer videos just walking through some of the labs that I've done recently or things that stood out to me as particularly interesting. And I figured for this first one, I would go through the general structure of how I'm building the Canvatorium app. Because it was kind of fun to do. So I figured I would share some of that, and then we can look at a few of the labs along the way. So in the simulator, when I launched the app, I have this main window here. I plan on adding a lot to this over time, but for now, it just loads a list of labs and groups them into a features labs section at the top and an all labs section at the bottom. So basically every lab I add will end up down there, and I can use the featured labs section to pin the labs that I'm currently working on, so I don't have to go scrolling for them every time I launch the simulator. And when I click on one of these, it takes me to the lab details, and I can see what type of lab it is. This is a volume. So the three types that I've got are window, volume, and spaces, basically the three types that Apple introduced on this platform. So I'm doing labs in all three of those types. And from here, I can see any notes about it, any details. I can render this out as markdown as needed. And maybe I might even throw in some sample code or example code into this at some point in the future. But for right now, it's just name of the lab and some lab notes. And then from here, I can open the lab. And this opens one of three things, either a window, a volume, or an immersive space. In this case, it opened a volume because that's the type of lab this is. And unfortunately, Vision OS doesn't really give us control over where windows and volumes open. They just always open in front of the window that you clicked on or wherever you were looking. So I can't position it anywhere that I would like, but you get the idea. And I can also close the lab, reopen it, things like that. So that's the general structure of how it works in the simulator. What that looks like behind the scenes, we'll go to the code in a moment, but essentially we have our main app file. This is kind of our entry point for the application. We've got a single main window group, and that is hosting the directory view, which has a navigation stack and a list of labs. From the list of labs, we can go to the detail view. The detail view does a little bit of extra work to decide when we click that button, open a lab, is it going to use a window, a volume, or a space? And it does that. All of these dark red boxes are window types that are declared at the app level. So the detail view will determine what type of lab content we need to show and pass it to one of those functions to open it correctly. And then whichever one of these opens, the root view of them is all the same. There's a single view called the router view that basically just switches on a string and decides which of the lab Swift UI views we're going to render. So hopefully that is relatively clear. It makes sense to me. And it's not an ideal structure, but I just wanted to get something up and running as quickly as possible because I want to spend most of my time in these individual files actually tinkering and making stuff for spatial computing, not spending tons of time on the app itself at this point. So let's take a look at the code. So like I said, looking over the same structure in freeform, we'll just go through the same thing in code. We've got the app, it loads our data model. We've got a single main window group that's hosting the directory. So this is all the content outside of the labs, the list of labs, lab notes, the ability to open and close labs, all of that is in this main window group. And then we register the window groups and the immersive spaces that we can use elsewhere when we're opening the labs. I have basically hard-coded data at this point. I may clean this up in the future, probably in the very near future. But for now, I just have a single lab type, or a lab struct, and I can give it a title, a type, a date, a subtitle, and a description. So this is all the content that will appear in the app and that I'm using in the videos and things like that. Just give me one place to type all of the stuff in and kind of keep it all together. And anytime I need to make a new lab, I can just copy the previous one and paste it and modify it from there. And then this is added to the application with observables, so I can track changes on that. And again, it's injected into the app in the environment of the main window, so I can access that anywhere in the main window. I'm not injecting that into the subsequent windows because they can have their own kind of data stack as needed. So that's it for the lab data. Lab list is nothing particularly interesting. We've got a list and a list row. I can show you what that looks like in the preview. So it's just, like I said, just a pretty stock list component with two sections, the featured labs and the all labs section, and a navigation link on each of the labs so we can go to the detail component, the detail view. So this is where some of the extra work happens that I mentioned earlier. From a Swift UI standpoint, it's basically just a very simple window. It's getting the window and open and dismiss window stuff from the environment as well as the open immersive space and dismiss immersive space environment variables, and just creating a couple sections here, and the button that will open the labs will just basically use the lab type to determine, hey, is it this one that perform this helper function? Is it a volume? Use this helper function. Is it a space? Use this one. And these are pretty similar in structure, but they use a slightly different logic. So the window, we use the open and dismiss window environment variables, passing in a lab title as the value. So this call, it goes right up to this code and passes through this value into the call to lab router. So basically, we've gone from, when we click that button, we go from here into one of these into this. This is essentially what we're doing. We're kind of doing it through the app. So maybe I can read all the lines of from the detail into one of those things and then into there. Something like that. So that's pretty much it for the lab detail. Lab router is about as dumb as it can be. It just uses view builder and I can only assume will be a very long case statement as I keep adding labs. I haven't thought of a better way to do this yet, but if you know of one, let me know. I would love to just include the lab itself as part of the data, but I have not figured out a way to do that makes Xcode happy. So for now, I'm just using this very simple router view that just passes in that route string, switches on them, and I've got kind of a default case for anything that doesn't match one of my existing ones. And then at this point, we actually have working labs. So when we, go to lab 1, we can open it here. I may not have a preview here. Yes, I do. And this will just open. It is a window with some text and a reality view showing a model. So the preview shows that for us here. Labs 2 and 3 are very similar, just using volumes and immersive spaces to do essentially the same thing. So this one is in a volume. Brief side note, I don't know why the preview, SwiftUI preview in the canvas here, for a volume will still show a window behind it. Even when I switch the preview to volumetric type, it still does that. It's kind of weird. It doesn't do that in the simulator, it just does it in the preview. Not a big deal, but it kind of annoys me a little bit. And pretty much, you kind of get the gist of it now. I'm not going to make you go through all the labs. I've got individual videos for that. But again, that's the basic structure. If anybody watching this has any better ideas for how to handle, particularly the router, this kind of gnarly switch statement, or a better way to encode the data that I can include the actual Swift UI views for the labs in that. That would be great. But yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. And let me know if you have questions or things that you want me to try in the labs going forward. Thank you.